I'm Lauren Bennett, 34 years old, and the last time my mother touched my face, it wasn't a kiss or a caress. It was the kind of slap that stops a room cold. 200 guests froze mid-toast, mid-bite, mid-laugh, as the echo of her hand on my cheek cut through the ballroom like a dropped crystal. My diamond earring flew halfway across the marble floor. They just finished clapping for the generous gift I hadn't agreed to give. That night, I didn't just lose a piece of jewelry, I lost the last thread tying me to the version of family I used to believe in. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to let me know where you're listening from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand your ground when it would have been easier to stay silent. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, the oldest of 2 daughters in a household that preached hard work, humility, and family first. My dad ran a small logistics firm, and my mom made sure we said please and thank you before we ever got dessert. Growing up, I believed love looked like shared chores and Sunday potlucks. I also learned early that family first sometimes meant Lauren last. Natalie was the golden child, warm, sweet, charming, in a way that felt like it belonged in a Hallmark ad. I was the serious one, the quiet one, the daughter they said would make something of herself, though somehow never quite the right something. By the time I turned 30, I was living in Chicago, working my way up the ranks at Chang Equity Partners. The hours were brutal, the meetings endless, but the view from my apartment made every late night worth it. Not that my family ever asked. My dad still thought I did something with spreadsheets, and my mom once introduced me to her friend as the daughter who lives alone with the glass walls. Meanwhile, Natalie was engaged to a man my parents adored, planning a picture-perfect wedding in a historic hotel back in our hometown. I flew in early the morning of the wedding. The Grand Marlowe Hotel looked like something out of a magazine, draped in white linen and soft candlelight. I'd chipped in $50,000 to help cover the venue and flowers, not that anyone mentioned it. Instead, the first thing my mother said when I walked in was, "Couldn't you have picked something softer to wear?" My dress was navy silk, clean structured, maybe a little too close to what I'd wear to a board meeting, but I didn't come to impress anyone. I just came to support my sister. Natalie, of course, looked radiant, and she deserved to. She was marrying the man she loved, surrounded by everyone who'd always adored her. I stayed busy with the details, checking the seating chart, fixing centerpieces, answering vendor questions. My dad gave me a tight smile and said, "Just don't rearrange everything like you always do." It was the kind of comment I'd grown used to, a compliment wrapped in a reminder not to overstep. The whispers started during the cocktail hour. "Is Lauren still single? How's her little place in the city?" I didn't correct them. I didn't say that my apartment was a 500-square-foot penthouse on the 40th floor with floor-to-ceiling views of the skyline. I didn't tell them it was featured in a real estate magazine or that I'd paid for it in cash. What would have been the point? They wouldn't have believed me. Or worse, they'd twist it into another reason I was too much, too ambitious, too independent, too unfeminine. My uncle chuckled and said, "Still no ring, huh?" My cousin Derek joked that if I spent less time in boardrooms, I might have a date. I smiled, adjusted a vase, checked my watch. It was easier to fade into tasks than confront the hollowness that followed me into every family gathering. But then I overheard something that pulled the air from my lungs. My father leaning in close to my mother, whispering, "We'll make the announcement after the toast. She won't say no in front of everyone." And my mother, without a hint of hesitation, replied, "She won't have a choice. Not if she wants to save face." They were talking about my home, my sanctuary, the one thing they'd never given me and now expected me to hand over. What I didn't know yet was how far they were willing to go to make sure I did. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as my father rose from his seat, tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon. The music quieted, and a hush settled over the room. 200 heads turned his way, smiles forming in anticipation of a father's wedding toast. I already knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready for the way it would feel when he said it out loud. With so many people here we love, he began Carol, and I wanted to do something special for our newlyweds. His eyes landed on Natalie, who gave him a practiced smile as she clutched Ben's arm. I watched her fingers curl at just the right angle. We're thrilled to share that Lauren has generously agreed to give her sister and Ben her penthouse as a wedding gift. The applause erupted instantly, followed by murmurs of surprise and admiration. I felt every gaze shift toward me like a spotlight. I hadn't agreed to anything. I stayed seated, still holding my glass. Natalie brought her hands to her chest, eyes wide with a kind of wonder that felt too rehearsed. "Are you serious?" she called into her microphone, her voice carrying across the tables. The Penthouse. There were more gasps than a round of clapping. Someone at my table wiped away a tear. My father gestured toward me. "Come up here, Lauren," he said. "Let's have the whole family together for this special moment." I rose slowly, setting my glass down with care. I didn't go up to the head table. I didn't smile. I stood still and said clearly and without raising my voice, "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" The room stilled. My father's face twitched, but he kept the microphone close. "Your penthouse, sweetheart. You said it would be a lovely gift for your sister and Ben." I never said that, I replied. This wasn't discussed with me. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Whispers, glances, shifting chairs. My father's smile thinned. "Don't be difficult, Lauren. Not tonight." I took a breath. "This is not the time or place to talk about my home. We can speak privately." "There's nothing to discuss," my mother said, appearing beside him and taking the mic. "It's a wedding gift. From the family. It's my property," I said, voice steady. "And I haven't agreed to give it away." Now the room really started murmuring. I could hear phrases breaking through. Why would she say no? So selfish. On Natalie's big day, Natalie's eyes welled up with tears, perfectly timed. "Lauren," she said softly, "I thought you wanted me to be happy." "I do," I said. "But your happiness doesn't require my home." "She's your sister," my Uncle Tom called out. "She's starting a new life. Don't you want to help her?" Others chimed in, voices rising one over another. "She's not even married. What does she need all that space for? She's always been cold. It's just a place to live." I stood still. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Then Derek, loud as ever, called out, "Come on, Lauren. It's not like you can't buy another one. I'm not discussing my finances," I said. "Everything's about money with you," my mother snapped, still holding the microphone. "Your sister's happiness should come first." "If her happiness depends on taking what's mine," I said quietly, "then maybe we need to talk about that." Gasps rolled through the room. Someone near the back booed. The wedding photographer kept snapping photos, flash after flash. "You're embarrassing us," my father hissed. I didn't flinch. I'm not the one making a scene. At that moment, I felt a buzz in my purse and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Marcus, then a message, "Saw the live stream." On standby. I looked around. Sure enough, Ben's younger brother had his phone propped on the table, still broadcasting. The red live light blinked in the corner. "You're streaming this?" I asked aloud. He quickly grabbed his phone, but it was too late. More messages from Marcus. "Your call. Say the word." I slipped my phone back into my clutch. Natalie sighed dramatically. "All this fuss over a place. I thought my sister loved me enough to help." The audience turned again, swept up in her tears. I could see heads shaking in disapproval. My father kept checking his phone. His expression had started to shift less frustration, more concern. "Your wedding is trending, by the way," I said, my voice low. My thoughts drifted to 6 months earlier, when Marcus had asked for a special clause in the Penthouse documents, a legal safeguard for assets awarded to executives in cases of external coercion. At the time, I hadn't thought it was necessary, but he had insisted. She's always been difficult, my father said to no one in particular. But family means something. It should. Family doesn't corner each other, I said. Not like this. The room went quiet again. Servers had stopped walking. Glasses sat untouched. Even the children at the far table were still. Then I saw her, my mother walking toward me across the dance floor, heels sharp against the tile, her expression unreadable. She still held the mic. "Lauren Bennett," she said loudly, "you will not ruin this day. You will not disgrace this family." "I'm not the one creating a spectacle," I said. "We gave you everything," she said, voice breaking. "You gave Natalie everything," I replied. "What I have, I built. You ungrateful." She caught herself, paused, then tried to smile. "Just give your sister the keys. It's such a small thing." "No." The word hung in the air. Her face tightened. "You will do this," she said under her breath, "or what I asked." She lifted the microphone again. "Everyone, my daughter seems to have forgotten what family means. Perhaps you can remind her." The room shifted again, unease spreading. "Give your sister the keys," she said again, her voice low but sharp. "Now." "No," I said again. "You selfish, ungrateful girl," she snapped. "After everything we've done, I didn't move. I didn't speak." Then it happened. Her hand rose and came down across my face, hard. The slap echoed across the room. My earring flew off, skidding across the marble. Every guest froze. Silence. I stood still, hand at my side cheek, burning. I could hear her breathing into the microphone. My reflection looked back at me from the mirrored wall. I walked slowly across the room, picked up the earring, and put it back on. Then I turned. "Congratulations, Natalie," I said. "I hope your marriage brings you joy." I picked up my clutch and walked toward the exit. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Once the doors shut behind me, I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. He answered immediately. "Lauren, green light," I said. "Understood. Are you all right?" I touched my cheek. "Just execute the plan." And then I stepped into the elevator, ready for what came next. The elevator ride to the lobby was quiet. I didn't check my reflection in the mirrored walls. I knew what I looked like, a woman in a silk dress with a flushed cheek walking out of her sister's wedding reception without a word. My heels clicked through the marble hallway as I passed hotel staff who glanced up, then quickly looked away. The valet recognized me and opened the door without comment. Outside, the evening air had cooled, and I took one steadying breath before getting into the back of a black car waiting by the curb. By the time we reached my building, the sun had dropped low behind the skyline. James, the evening doorman, opened the door and gave me a small nod. He didn't ask questions, just held the elevator with one hand and pressed the button for my floor. The ride up was silent, except for the faint hum of the motor and the low buzz of my phone in my bag. I didn't look at it. Inside the penthouse, the silence was different. Still but not cold. The kind of quiet I'd earned after years of noise. I set my clutch on the counter and walked straight to the freezer for an ice pack. I sat on the edge of the couch, pressed it to my face, and waited for the sting to ease. It didn't take long before the front desk buzzed to let me know Marcus had arrived. He didn't come alone. When I opened the door, he stood with two of his legal team, Laurel and Damon, both of whom I'd met briefly during a shareholder review last fall. They stepped inside with briefcases in hand, professional and calm, as if this were just another contract negotiation. Marcus didn't say much at first. He took one look at me, nodded once, then turned to the others. "Conference room," he said, and they moved with purpose. I followed them in and sat across the table. Laurel opened a folder and began laying out documents, ownership titles, clauses, time-stamped copies of the Penthouse agreement. Damon placed a laptop in front of Marcus and pulled up the live stream replay. A freeze frame of the ballroom filled the screen. My mother, mid-slap my face, turned earring mid-air. Marcus clicked pause, then looked at me. "This was seen by just over 40,000 people in the last 2 hours," he said. It's been reshared by 3 local outlets and 1 national finance page. He turned the screen toward me, showing headlines I didn't need to read. "We'll move quickly." I nodded. "My father has no idea you and I are connected." "He will," Marcus said. "Tonight." While the lawyers organized the paperwork, I stood by the window and looked out at the city. From this height, everything seemed small: the buildings, the traffic, the voices that had tried to shrink me down my entire life. Marcus stepped up beside me and spoke quietly. "You still have control here. I won't do anything without your go-ahead. Let them see what respect looks like," I said. He nodded. "Done." Back downstairs in the hotel ballroom, things had shifted. The celebration had dissolved into anxious chatter. Guests scrolled their phones past rumors whispered in corners. According to the texts I started receiving, the mood had turned. The video was being passed around in real time. The slap, the refusal, the stunned silence, all of it captured and reshared. I didn't reply to any of the messages. I just waited. Marcus and the lawyers arrived at the Grand Marlowe less than 30 minutes after I gave the word. They entered through the front lobby, walked past the fountain, and made their way straight into the ballroom. No announcement, no theatrics, just quiet authority. I didn't have to be there to know what happened next. One of the servers at the hotel who I'd tipped earlier that day sent me a voice message. It started with a sharp intake of breath and the words, "Your dad just turned white." Marcus approached the head table and placed a stack of documents on the tablecloth in front of my father. He introduced himself, full name, company title, and a direct statement about his stake in Bennett & Cody. 40%, he said, clearly enough for nearby guests to hear. According to the messages coming in, my mother's reaction was loud enough to startle people in the back of the room. Natalie cried again. Ben tried to step between them, and my father, for the first time in a very long time, said nothing at all. The next message came from Brian Foster, Natalie's brother-in-law, the same one who had live-streamed the reception. He called me from outside the ballroom, whispering into the phone. "Your mom screamed," he said. Not like embarrassed screaming, more like scared. He told me Marcus had started reading parts of the shareholder agreement out loud. He explained how the Penthouse had been part of my executive compensation and that any attempt to coerce or publicly pressure me to transfer ownership triggered a specific clause. He said the words breach of moral conduct and fiduciary violation had been used more than once. At some point during all this, my father tried to interrupt. He raised his voice. "This is family business," he said, loud enough to carry. And that's when Marcus made it clear the moment they made it public, it stopped being private. The final message came from Laurel, who texted directly. "Emergency board meeting ready if needed. He's holding the agreement. Then he looks like he just realized who you are." I didn't move from the window. I didn't need to. My place in the room was already established, not down there by the cake and the flowers, but here above it all where my name was on the deed, and my voice didn't need to be raised to be heard. Marcus called me from the ballroom speakerphone. "Lauren," he said, "are you with us?" I answered, clear and calm. "I'm here." The room quieted. "We've confirmed the video, the property terms, and the attempted coercion. Do you want to press charges for the assault?" There was a pause. I imagined the guests holding their breath. My parents watching the doors instead of the documents. Natalie still dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed napkin. I didn't answer that question yet. Instead, I listened as Marcus explained that their actions had not only put their daughter in a legally compromising position, they had also endangered their business reputation, their partnerships, and the stability of the company. I could hear paper rustling. Then my father's voice quieter now. "We didn't know. But they did. They just didn't believe I'd ever stand up to them. And now the entire room was watching what happened when I did. I stayed by the window while the speakerphone carried everything from the ballroom into my penthouse. Marcus didn't rush. His voice was measured, almost quiet, but it held the kind of weight that turned attention like a tide. He stated his role again for the guests who hadn't caught it the first time. Founder and CEO of Chang Equity Partners, majority investor in several firms across the region, and a 40% stakeholder in Bennett & Co. He didn't lead with threats. He started with facts. He told them I wasn't just an employee, I was his vice president of development. I'd overseen their Asia-Pacific expansion, negotiated strategic partnerships, and structured the deal that landed Hayes Automotive's Chinese distribution contract, the one my father had tried to bid for 3 years ago. That deal alone had earned our company $40 million. I was the one who closed it. Gasps spread through the crowd as Marcus continued. Some people looked down at their phones, others up at the ballroom stage. My name, my job, and my title now lived in their reality not as a rumor, but as a confirmed truth. Even through the phone, I could hear my mother's voice crack as she tried to object. "This is a family matter," she said. "No," Marcus replied calmly. "This is corporate fraud. Public coercion of a company executive during a live-streamed event. And now it's reputational damage." My father finally broke his silence. We didn't know he started, but Marcus cut him off. "You did know," he said. "You just didn't expect consequences." The ballroom quieted again. Someone near the back whispered loud enough to carry, "Is she really that high up?" Someone else answered, "Apparently yes." Marcus laid the documents on the table. Compensation records, ownership agreements, the contingency clause that protected my assets from familial pressure. Clause 93.1. My father had signed a nearly identical clause in his own company's partnership agreement 3 years ago. He couldn't claim ignorance. He knew what this meant. The clause gave Marcus the authority to intervene if anyone attempted to manipulate me into surrendering corporate property, which the Penthouse qualified as since it was part of my executive package. And because it happened in a public setting, witnessed and recorded, it met the threshold for a breach of corporate ethics. Marcus asked the room, "Would you like me to explain what happens when someone violates the trust of a company's leadership?" No one answered. He continued, "If I call a board meeting tomorrow morning, I have the votes to force a leadership review at Bennett & Co. I already have interest from 2 external firms willing to pick up your contracts." My mother's voice rose again, shaking this time. "You can't do this at a wedding." "It's our daughter's wedding day. I didn't bring this here," Marcus said. "You did." There was a pause. Then I heard my name again. "Lauren," he said. "Are you still on the line?" "I'm here," I replied. "Would you like to pursue legal charges for the physical assault?" The room held still. I could hear glasses being set down gently. The microphone squeaked slightly as someone shifted. My mother didn't speak. My father didn't interrupt. Natalie made a soft sound, something between a sob and a sigh. I didn't answer the question. Not yet. Instead, I said, "I'd like my parents to formally acknowledge that the penthouse is mine, that I did not offer it as a gift, and that no such conversation ever took place." Marcus relayed the request, then added, "And you will not speak to her again about it. Not directly, not indirectly, not through another family member." More silence. Then paper moved again. Damon, one of Marcus's attorneys, spoke next. "Mr. Bennett, we need your signature here. This document states you will refrain from any future claims or announcements regarding the property. It also acknowledges misconduct. Someone cleared their throat, possibly Uncle Tom." The tension had shifted. What started as a celebration had become something else entirely, a reckoning. Eventually, I heard chairs move. Someone stepped away from the mic. Then my father's voice returned low and unsteady. "We'll sign it." Marcus said thank you. He didn't linger. He didn't make a speech. He simply confirmed that the agreement would be processed by the morning and that any breach going forward would be handled through corporate legal channels. He wished Natalie and Ben well. Then he ended the call. I stayed standing for a long moment after the speakerphone went silent. Behind me, Laurel and Damon packed the documents into their briefcases without a word. Marcus glanced toward the hallway, then looked back at me. "You still haven't answered my question." "I know," I said. He nodded once. "You don't have to decide tonight." We walked to the elevator together. Before the doors closed, he turned back to me. "They underestimated you," he said. "They won't do that again." When they left, the penthouse felt quiet in a different way, Not empty, but steady, like something had shifted beneath the surface and finally settled into place. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a lawyer or a hotel employee. It was a name I hadn't seen in a long time. David Kim. We'd worked together on a logistics merger 2 years ago. He now ran one of the biggest shipping companies on the East Coast. His message was simple. Saw the video. If your father can't keep his house in order, he can't manage mine. Contract withdrawn. And that was just the beginning. By Sunday morning, the video had been reshared over 100,000 times. I woke to more than 30 text messages, half from numbers I didn't recognize. Headlines from local news outlets filled my notifications. One read, "Wedding gift gone wrong. Executives' family ambushes. Her for Penthouse." Another was more direct. She said no. Then her mother slapped her. I didn't respond to anyone. Not yet. Natalie tried calling 6 times before noon. Ben sent one message asking if we could just talk things through. I didn't answer. Instead, I reviewed the footage Marcus's team had pulled together, every camera angle, every word, every reaction frozen in high definition. His legal department had already prepared 2 separate memos, one for internal record keeping, the other for possible public release depending on how the next few days went. At noon, sharp, Marcus called. "Client fallout's begun," he said. 3 contracts terminated, 2 more under review. Sarah Williams pulled hers this morning. Cited irreversible reputational concerns. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "What's the loss? About $3 million total." "Not enough to kill them," he said, "but enough to make them bleed." By evening, the wedding reception was being labeled a disaster in business circles. A silent reel of my mother's slap had been turned into a looped GIF. The comments weren't just from random users anymore. Now they were coming from executives, fund managers, and investors. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood at my window watching the city lights. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear, like a fog had lifted. Then the group text started. First from relatives, cousins, second cousins, people I hadn't heard from in years. Some defended my parents. Others said they'd had no idea how I'd been treated. Aunt Patricia sent a message I didn't expect. "You were right to walk away. Your mother crossed a line." Even Derek texted. "Hey, I was out of line. I didn't know it was that bad." Then came the message from Brian's mother. "We're leaving the hotel early. This is disgraceful. Our family can't be part of this." His father followed up an hour later. "The wedding is on hold until we understand what we just walked into." Natalie sent a final text just before midnight. "You've ruined everything. I hope you're proud." I didn't answer. The next morning, Marcus's assistant forwarded a compiled list of client losses from Bennett & Co. 6 major accounts had pulled out. Expansion talks were dead. Their lender had requested a meeting. I didn't follow up. Marcus would handle it. But the real shift came that afternoon. Marcus called me into his office for a private meeting. His door closed behind me, and he slid a folder across the table. "Board met this morning," he said. "They want to offer you a new position. Senior VP Global Operations. Full control over overseas expansions, plus a 40% raise in base and equity." I looked down at the paperwork. "They saw how you handled everything," he added. "You didn't just protect your assets. You held your ground under pressure most execs twice your age couldn't have managed." I nodded once. "Thank you. You earned it." He paused before continuing. "There's one more thing. That bonus bump. You can do what you want with it. But if I were you, I'd put it towards something that matters to you, something that reminds you who you are outside of all this." Later that night, I made a donation in the full amount to a nonprofit women's shelter that helps professionals escape abusive family dynamics. The receipt sat folded in the drawer beside my bed. By Tuesday, the apology came in. Not from my mother, from my father. A formal notarized statement written by their lawyer but signed in his own hand. It acknowledged the property was mine, the conduct at the reception was unacceptable, and that no future claims would be made. It included a public apology for the way I'd been treated, brief and personal, but public. It met the terms of Marcus's deadline with 12 minutes to spare. I printed it, read it once, then filed it away. My mother didn't apologize. Instead, she posted a long message on her social media account claiming I had been manipulated by greed and that corporate culture had stolen her daughter. The post included a photo of Natalie crying in her wedding dress. The comments weren't what she expected. People reposted it with captions like "classic narcissist deflection" and "no wonder her daughter walked away." Natalie texted again a week later. "You embarrassed us. You broke the family." I didn't reply. Instead, I called building management and updated the guest list. My parents' names were removed from access. James, the doorman, pulled me aside the next day. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "My daughter went through something like that. Sometimes you gotta choose peace over people." I nodded. Then I changed the locks. 3 weeks passed. The wedding was never rescheduled. Brian's family quietly returned the gifts and canceled the honeymoon. Natalie posted a photo from a weekend cabin trip alone with a caption that read, "Healing isn't linear." The comments were turned off. At work, things moved fast. My new role brought longer hours, more oversight, and a team that stretched across 5 time zones. I flew to Singapore, Seoul, and Sydney within a month. Each flight felt like a step further from what had happened, and at the same time a step closer to the life I'd built without anyone's permission. Back home, the silence from my parents held. No apology from my mother, no follow-up from my father, not even a thank you for the legal release that kept them from being sued. Then one morning in March, I opened my front door to find a small envelope on the floor of the foyer. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a gift certificate, 6 prepaid sessions with a family therapist. The card read, "This is insulting." I stared at it for a long time before sending a single text back to Natalie. "It's necessary." Then I blocked the number and slid the envelope into the back of a drawer. Spring came quickly. The city thawed, and I found myself walking more to work through the park to coffee with colleagues I'd once only known through video calls. My building felt different now. It wasn't just a place I lived. It was a place I protected. One morning, James, the doorman, nodded toward a man standing outside across the street. "He's been coming by every couple days," he said. "Never tries to come in, just stands there, looks up toward your windows." I glanced past the glass. It was my father. He didn't wave. He didn't hold anything, just stood with his hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed upward. I didn't go down. The next afternoon, I received a call from Marcus. "Your father asked for a meeting," he said. Off the record. Just him. I hesitated. "Did he say why wants to talk?" "Said he started therapy." I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a quiet downtown cafe near the office. Marcus offered to come with me, but I told him I'd be fine. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table near the window. My father showed up right on time, no briefcase, no suit, just a wool sweater and slacks. He looked tired. Not sick, just smaller than I remembered. He sat without saying anything at first, then looked up and said, "I didn't know how to raise you." I didn't answer. He folded his hands. "You weren't the daughter I expected, and I didn't know what to do with that. You tried to take something that didn't belong to you," I said. "I know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. "It's not legal, just personal." He slid it across the table. "I didn't open it. I didn't come for forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know. I've been wrong about a lot, and not just you." I nodded. It wasn't enough to fix anything, but it was more than I ever thought I'd hear. When I got home, I finally read the note. It wasn't long, just a list of things he said he should have seen. My first job out of college, the award I won in Singapore, the day I bought the Penthouse. Each line ended the same way. I wasn't proud then, but I should have been. I folded it and placed it beside the therapist's certificate in the drawer. I didn't throw it out, but I didn't reply either. By the end of the month, the rest of the family seemed to understand the shift. No more texts from aunts or cousins, no more group message threads, just a quiet distance that finally stayed quiet. And in its place, something else was growing, something I hadn't expected. One Friday night, Marcus invited me to dinner with his family. His wife, Claire, cooked. His two daughters, Sarah, a junior in college, and Elise, a senior in high school, asked about my job, my apartment, even the story in the news. "You're the woman from the wedding video," Elise said. "You're kind of a legend." Her sister nudged her, but I smiled. Just someone who learned the hard way to say no. Claire poured more wine and passed around dessert. "You're welcome at our table anytime," she said. No pressure, no expectations. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. 6 months after the wedding, the fallout had settled into something quieter but far more permanent. My name was still on headlines now and then, mostly in business write-ups or leadership roundtables. The wedding incident had faded from trending tabs, replaced by newer scandals, but the people who mattered hadn't forgotten. I was invited to speak on a panel about women in executive leadership, not because of the slap, not because of the live stream, but because I had navigated all of it and stayed standing. I declined the first time. Marcus convinced me to accept the second. "You're not speaking because of what happened," he said. "You're speaking despite it." That night, I sat with Claire and the girls afterward at a quiet corner table in their favorite Italian restaurant. Sarah told me she'd shared my name in her business ethics class. Elise pulled up an article from her phone, my profile in Forbes featuring the Singapore deal, the Seoul expansion, and the Tokyo partnership. Not a word about the wedding. At home, my penthouse felt lived in now, not just clean and cold and high above it all, but lived in. A few new plants by the windows, a record player in the corner, a small framed photo of the Chang family dinner tucked discreetly on a shelf. One afternoon, Marcus stepped into my office and handed me a sealed envelope. "This came to the building," he said. "No sender listed." Inside was a printout, a screenshot of my mother's social media post from the night of the wedding. Below it, a handwritten note. "I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted." It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. I placed the paper in my desk drawer without a word. Marcus didn't ask questions. Later that week, I received a package at the front desk. No return label. Inside was a bundle of thank you cards, ivory cardstock gold trim still wrapped in plastic. The same design Natalie had picked out for her wedding. No note. James handed it over without comment. "Want me to block deliveries from that name?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Please." The quiet after the storm was not peace, not yet. But it was clarity. I knew who was no longer allowed in my life. I knew which doors had closed for good. I changed the codes on the elevator access. I added 2 more names to the no visitor list. I stopped checking the group threads I'd been muted in for months. And then one morning I sat down and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter. It wasn't addressed to my mother or Natalie. It was addressed to me. Not the me who stood in a ballroom trying to stay calm while 200 people stared. Not the me who walked away with a red cheek and steady hands, but the me who had once believed that being the bigger person meant always staying quiet. I wrote 3 pages. I didn't write for closure. I wrote to remember. I wrote down what it felt like to buy my first apartment, what it meant to sit at that boardroom table in Tokyo, what it sounded like when Marcus said, "You're not alone." And when I was done, I sealed the letter and placed it inside my nightstand. Not for anyone else, just for me. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It isn't revenge. It isn't even apology. Sometimes it's just a door that stays closed, a lock that clicks, a room that feels safe, and the quiet that finally means you're home. The following spring, I stood at the tall windows in my living room, coffee in hand, watching the city stretch out beneath the morning light. The air was still soft quiet in a way that felt earned. The penthouse hadn't changed much, but something in me had. I no longer looked out at this view, wondering if it proved anything. It didn't have to. I had nothing left to prove. Bennett and Compey survived the storm but never regained its footing. My father stepped back from day-to-day operations by the end of the fiscal year. Through mutual contacts, I learned he'd begun attending weekly counseling sessions. It didn't make up for what happened, but it meant something. My mother stayed on the edges of local social circles, still telling her version of the story. Most people had seen the video. They knew better than to ask questions. Natalie and Brian divorced quietly just 4 months after the wedding. The therapy hadn't helped the way she hoped. According to what filtered back through extended family, the sessions had uncovered more than she wanted to hear. Entitlement avoidance, a refusal to take accountability. Things I'd known for years, but never said out loud. She texted once long after the ink had dried on the court papers. "You got what you wanted," she wrote. I thought about responding. I didn't. There was no satisfaction in saying I hadn't wanted this, that I'd only wanted to be seen and then to be left alone. Instead, I let the message sit there unanswered like a door I'd already closed. At work, things grew steadily. The Singapore office expanded into a regional headquarters. I took on new markets and trained younger women coming up behind me. Some of them had heard the story. Most had only heard pieces. But every once in a while, one would stop me after a meeting and say something simple like, "Thank you for showing us it's okay to set boundaries." Marcus and Claire continued to invite me to family dinners. Sarah landed a summer internship at a firm in Boston. Elise sent me her college application essays for review. I never expected to become part of someone else's family, but there was something healing in it, in the way they never asked me to explain myself, in the way their table always had room for one more chair. That's what I kept. Not the headlines or the boardroom promotion or the viral praise. What I carried forward was the stillness, the knowledge that I had walked away without rage, without revenge, without bitterness, that I had chosen something better. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace or keeping your dignity, you'll understand this next part. Some people will never see you clearly. They will call you selfish when you stop giving. They will call you cruel when you draw a line. But you do it anyway because you know the cost of not doing it. And sometimes the hardest part isn't standing up. It's staying firm when the silence comes after. To the listener out there who needed this, I see you. And I hope you know you're allowed to build a life that doesn't require you to shrink for anyone. If this story meant something to you, feel free to share it with someone else who might need the reminder. And if you're ready, I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Take care of your peace. It's worth more than they'll ever understand.